Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a review of Cobra Kai Season 5. Now there will be spoilers of this season within this review, so just beware when going into this overall video, and you can check out my coverage of the previous 4 seasons of the show, and I'll leave some links within the description. Now quickly, just to recap over the events over Season 4, where we saw the return of Tori Silver, who was the main villain from Karate Kid Part 3, who was convinced back by John Kreese to rejoin Cobra Kai against both Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang. Daniel and Johnny would continue to disagree as both their students prepared for the returning All Valley tournament, where we saw Hawk winning the men's side by defeating Robbie, and Tori defeating Sam to win the women's side, although her victory was tainted where she saw that Silver had bribed the referee. Miguel would travel to Mexico to find his original father after feeling left out by Johnny, and Silver would ultimately betray Kreese by setting him up to be arrested for assault, and he would take over Cobra Kai, looking to expand the brand on a global scale. And Daniel would team up with one-time enemy Chozen, realising he would need a far more ruthless approach in order to take down Cobra Kai. And we very much picked up with those loose story arcs throughout this season. The beginning very much focused on Miguel finally reconnecting with his father and finding out he's far more dangerous. The battle of wits and strategies between Daniel, Chozen and Silver continues to intensify, and this includes a fantastic arc of Chozen going undercover in Cobra Kai as one of Silver's newly recruited senseis. We do at last get the return of Mike Barnes, who was Daniel's main opponent from Karate Kid Part 3, seeing him as the owner of a furniture store, and even he feels the repercussions of the ongoing rivalry between Daniel and Silver. Sam continues with her inner struggles to define herself, and this results in her splitting up with Miguel, and the ongoing rivalry also causes the biggest fraction yet between Daniel and Amanda, which sees her leaving him alongside the kids, and this leaves Daniel even more unbalanced and angered and desperate in order to win the war. We see Johnny struggling to get Miguel and Robbie to come to some sort of understanding, and he also has to deal with the very surprising revelation that Carmen is pregnant. We see Tori struggling to deal with the result of her tainted victory and her conscience in using the extremities within Cobra Kai, and to be honest, this was a very similar arc as what we saw Hawk going through in Season 3. We also caught up with Kreese, who was in prison from the results of Season 4, trying to face his inner demons and past sins as he struggles to get an early release. Now, I've stated multiple times on this channel that Cobra Kai is the blueprint of how you continue an iconic franchise, and why for me it's been the best show on TV for certainly the last 2 to 3 years. The only concern has always been that would there be an eventual dip in quality? Would we eventually get that season that jumps the shark? Would we see diminishing returns start to kick in within this series? Well, I'm so pleased and overall very relieved to say that Season 5 not only continues the great one, but actually elevates it in many ways from Season 4. Now, not to fall into typical cliche to say that it's the best season overall, I'll probably need to do a bit more revision over that statement, but it does at the very least surpass Season 4 for the most part throughout this season. As well as plenty of action and soap drama as always, this year has perhaps the strongest character stories of the entire series, the pacing is much more assured, and the focus and balance in terms of the storytelling is far more superior. Now, there were so many reasons for this, but I think one of the biggest was that this year established very much that the adult characters are the strongest and far most interesting. They get the most priority, and there's definitely some real weight and depth to the overall dilemmas that they go through throughout this season. Now, previous seasons of this show have presented a somewhat ambiguity of the certain characters, but this time we have one clear antagonist in Tori Silver, of which everyone has to either unite together to defeat or feel conflicted against, and it just makes the story overall far more compelling. I also feel that the longer run time of each episode, which was around about 35 to 40 minutes, also played a very key part in allowing the show writers to extend these stories and just add a bit more development, which gave them a far more satisfying payoff throughout each episode. Now, in the role as Tori Silver, Thomas Ian Griffith is just fantastic, clearly relishing being a centre stage. He's given plenty of screen time to show his charisma and natural bravado, and I've always wondered why this actor hasn't been far more bigger in terms of Hollywood, because he's clearly got the natural talent in order to command your attention every time that he's on the screen. And as Tori Silver, he's a great villain because he's constantly 2 steps ahead of everybody else, which adds to his overall impact. This is a far more ambitious and sophisticated villain than what we saw within Kreese, and just like Kreese before him, this is another great example of taking an earlier villain from the franchise and making them an even more substantial character later on in the continuation, and I think it's just a brilliant performance yet again from Thomas Ian Griffith in the lead role. And talking of improved characters, we have to talk about Chozen, who was clearly the standout character this year. In this season, he's everything. He's intense, funny, he's heartfelt, he's emotional, he brings so much of the gravitas and quirkiness at the same time. He truly has some of the best scenes all throughout the season. I absolutely loved his undercover operation into Cobra Kai, and watching the back and forth between him and Silver was absolutely fascinating, especially in the early parts of episode 2, where we see them walking into the room and looking at all of the Japanese swords and talking about their previous masters and their history in terms of their training and all of their heritage. And we had such a great scene where Silver outs Chozen in terms of his identity, and then he pits all of his senseis against him, and then we see Chozen taking him down in a brutal fashion. I love the double act that we see between Chozen and Johnny. I believe it's in episode 6, as they take on more of the senseis within Cobra Kai, and I would be more than happy to watch a spin-off series with these two characters for sure. We had another fantastic scene later on in episode 9 where we see Chozen reflecting on his affections for Kumiko with Johnny, and then later on making a phone call to her before rushing to getting back in the limousine with both Daniel and Johnny. We had another hilarious sequence where he's training all of the students and chasing them all over Miyagi-Do garden and teaching them how to be more ruthless by holding an egg. And all of these sequences just told you how great a character that Chozen was. And actor Yuri Okamoto really brought a lot of the identity and the charisma to this series, and for me he was really the standout performance of this entire season. I then look at Miguel's arc concerning his father's true nature, which was amongst the most serious and darkest moments of the entire series. Now initially when they introduced this later on in season 4, I thought it would be much more of a throwaway story to accommodate actor Zola Madureira time to film the DC superhero Blue Beetle movie. But it was really treated with a lot more maturity and sincerity, and it was an extremely touching and moving moment where we saw Miguel discovering who his father was and running outside being all angry, and then reuniting with Johnny later on. And this was really a far more shift in tone, much more mature in terms of Cobra Kai than what we would see certainly in the earlier parts of this season. We then look at Tori, who had easily the strongest involvement of all of the younger characters, as I mentioned before, going the same conflicted arc as what Hawk did in season 3, wanting to excel at Cobra Kai, but at the same time she was still alert to the extremities of the philosophy and training. We would see her at first working with Kreese to try and expose Cobra Kai before becoming far more distant with him and the other students. She endures the harsh training of Silver's new head sensei. We had a fantastic callback to Karate Kid Part 3, where she has destroyed the training board, this time which is made of stone. Again reflecting back to that scene where we saw Silver training Daniel, and this is just great stuff and another great example of how the show writers remember what was so special about the previous films. Even Kreese had some impact throughout this season, as we see him struggling to get released from prison and having to deal with his inner demons. And we had a fantastic scene where he's talking to his therapist, and over this discussion we see him facing many faces of his past and present, and we even see the likes of a young version of Johnny as well as a young version of Kreese from his Vietnam days. And this was again fantastic, and I'm so glad that the showrunners didn't completely forget Kreese, who was very much of a strong villain throughout season 2 and season 3. Now for all of its great qualities, this season wasn't absolutely flawless. There were only really a small couple of issues. Now we all know the show likes to mix in a lot of comedy and more light-hearted moments amongst all of the serious drama and action, and whilst these moments weren't terrible throughout the season, they did take away some of the more compelling drive that was set up certainly throughout the opening episodes. So smaller arcs included Johnny finding out about Carmen's pregnancy, the on-off drama between Miguel and Sam. The younger characters such as Hawk and Eugene really felt more sidelined throughout this year, and even Sam's story, which started off quite strong when again we were tapping more into her psyche regarding her fears in terms of her abilities, and once again the psychic scar tissue of her encounters against Tori. But as the season went on, Sam felt far less relevant and really was only concerned more about her feelings towards Miguel. So whilst I'm glad they didn't repeat too much the ongoing rivalry between her and Tori, you just feel at this stage that the writers aren't quite sure where to take Sam as a character. They don't want to push her too far over the line in terms of the darker side, but I think that would actually benefit Sam and make her a far more stronger presence throughout the series. We also have to then talk about the involvement of Mike Barnes. which was really much more played for laughs as we see him encountered by Daniel and Chozen. We did have an hilarious moment when Chozen attacks him for no reason, and whilst it was good to see the actor reprise his role, I just found his entrance here a bit underwhelming when you consider such a great job as what we've seen with Kreese, Chozen and Silver. I really thought the show writers were going to do something similar with Barnes, maybe slowly introduce him throughout this season before making him far more of a substantial character throughout next season. But I didn't really see a lot of that development this time round, and again it was just played for much more comic relief, so I was a bit disappointed in the return of Mike Barnes. We then talk about the finale episode, which yet again provided multiple spectacle and fighting action as we see Daniel, Johnny and Chozen all going out on a drunken night before joining up with Barnes later on and deciding to go all out assault on Silver's house. We see the Cobra Kai students versus the Miyagi students yet again, very much repeating the same beats as what we saw from the season 3 finale, and this was still good, but it didn't quite carry the same impact, and it definitely wasn't as dramatic as what we saw within the season 2 finale where we had the brawl in the school. Now there were some highlights here. The Silver versus Chozen fight was absolutely great, where we see them actually fighting with weapons such as swords and the Kai, and this provided far more of the intensity throughout all of these encounters. I also loved Johnny's stand-up scene where he's getting beaten down by all of the other senseis and he sees the photo scan of his baby drop out of his pocket before rising up and fighting back yet again. So this was another fantastic moment, and a climatic fight was also good between both Daniel and Silver. So it was all action and excitement all the way through, but it did feel a bit just thrown together and it didn't really have the required build up. It almost felt like we needed another episode in between to truly set up all of the battle lines before going out into the all finale. We then had the final scene where we see Kreese faking his own prison attack in order to escape. So this was a bit telegraphed, but I'm glad in many ways because I think Kreese is a good villain overall. So it will be interesting to see exactly what he does now that he's out. What will happen to Silver now that he's been arrested after Daniel's son played the footage of him admitting to Tori that he bribed the referee. I'm sure that he's got multiple resources to get himself out of jail. Will we see a final confrontation between Silver and Kreese? And what will the future hold for all of the students regarding all of the dojos and karate in general? What will happen to Cobra Kai? I mean, it's still massively active despite Silver's arrest. Will the new sensei Kim Dan-hyun take over as the main leader? I liked her as a presence overall, and certainly she's had far more development now if she is to indeed be the overall villain for the next season. Will Daniel finally feel settled enough to stop battling against Cobra Kai? And how will Johnny adjust to fatherhood? I'm sure we'll have some hilarious moments seeing him cope with his newborn baby. And who will indeed go on to be the overall antagonist for the next season? Whatever happens, I'm pretty excited overall, as I just think overall season 5 has been one of the best and possibly the best of the overall series. So if I had to give an overall score for season 5 of Cobra Kai, I would give it a 9.4 out of 10. Truly outstanding and really strong character arcs this time round. There were still plenty of fun and standout moments, and overall I was extremely satisfied and pleased all the way through. It was only really finale, which wasn't a bad episode. I just felt as to all of the conflict, it just needed a bit more setting up. But despite all of this, Cobra Kai season 5 is truly a standout season, not only in terms of the series but also within overall television itself. It really is like no other series or indeed no other franchise right now. And I truly believe the likes of Kathleen Kennedy and David Zaslav, if they ever want to garner greater success in terms of the Star Wars and DC franchises, they really need to start watching Cobra Kai and take a look and learn from its lessons in how it's been able to do this now successfully for 5 seasons now. Somehow Cobra Kai has just been able to maintain its quality all the way through for all of the 5 seasons so far. It truly is amazing and an example to all within entertainment. Now despite all of this, the concern still remains as to whether the show will eventually outstay its welcome. I truly believe even more so now that season 6 should be the last. I don't really see how much more that they can do in terms of pushing the overall conflict. We really have brought most of the cameos back from the previous franchises. I believe it's only now Hilary Swank from the next Karate Kid as the last remaining cameo appearance. And even though Cobra Kai is very much somewhat of a fantasy, there is going to be that point where we do have to kind of move forward, and all of the older characters are going to have to start settling down and stop getting involved in this whole karate conflict, and the kids will take over. Now maybe we will see some sort of spin-off series. Again, if that is successful, that will depend very much on how well developed the younger characters are. Whilst the likes of Tori, Miguel, Sam and Robbie and Hawk are all very successful in terms of their development, some of the other characters such as Kenny still need a bit of work. They still come across as a bit one-dimensional and need a bit more development and layers added. Some sort of spin-off where the legacy of Cobra Kai is continued within the younger characters. So that's just something to consider, but that's later on down the line. But so far, Cobra Kai, brilliant, awesome, fantastic, fun, entertaining, one of the best seasons of the entire series, perhaps the second best overall. I'll have to do a further revision after that, but without question, the best show on television. I think that's undisputed by now, and from seeing all of the reviews and reactions online, it's so refreshing to have a show that garners almost complete positivity without any drama or toxic debate or discussions about identity or wokeness or virtual signaling. Everybody can just jump into Cobra Kai and just embrace all of the enjoyment and the madness and the fantasy and just celebrate it in general. And I think Cobra Kai is the example of what we should be seeing right now within all of mainstream entertainment. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and review of Cobra Kai Season 5. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Which season do you believe is the overall best? Do you think this season was the best? Or if you don't, then let me know which season you think is the ultimate within the Cobra Kai series so far. And are you like me? Do you think that Season 6 should ultimately be the last and that the series should go out with a bang? As I'm sure we all don't want a Game of Thrones situation, another series that had almost unadulterated support before falling in its final season. That is something that we definitely don't want happening to Cobra Kai. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and if there are any other TV shows or films or series that you'd like to see me cover within the channel, then also let me know within the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary on that for you within the future on the channel. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay in safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.